The following episode was originally recorded for a private podcast as part of the Equipped for Life course. It has been edited for public release, but may reference training material from the Equipped for Life course. Okay, one last question. I think this is an interesting question, and it's one I hadn't spent a lot of time thinking about until the last few days, but this was from the forum, and the person's name doesn't come up, it just says E. So, E, your question is now being answered. So it is going to take a little bit of time, but I actually really like the way they wrote out their question. It's very specific, and so I'm just going to read the whole thing. For the longest time, the popular narrative among abortion advocates was that abortion is a necessary evil, one that ought to be safe, legal, and rare. President Bill Clinton famously ran on this platform, appealing to what Newt Gingrich called the pro-choice but anti-abortion majority of Americans. Pro-life advocates took that sentiment and ran with it, implementing many legislative measures designed to make abortion both rarer and safer for the woman. So it's unsurprising that abortion advocates are in search of a new strategy, because it seems like kind of pro-lifers took advantage of this approach. About 2 years ago, the abortion lobby gradually began to promote the idea that there's nothing wrong with abortion whatsoever, and that any aversion to it, no matter how slight, constitutes, quote, abortion stigma. This begins with that video of Emily Letts giggling as she supposedly undergoes an abortion. I'm going to link to that video if people haven't seen it. It's hard to watch, but I think for a lot of people, probably worth watching. There's an important moment in our culture. It was followed by Katha Pollitt's book, Pro Reclaiming Abortion Rights, along with women coming out and sharing regret-free abortion stories on both social and traditional media. The Shut Your Abortion hashtag and the 1 in 3 campaigns being notable examples. Their allies in Hollywood soon complied with several popular sitcoms featuring abortion-friendly storylines, and at the 2016 Democratic National Convention, the head of NARAL was applauded for talking about her abortion. I've actually got that audio. I'm going to play it now.
To succeed in life, all we need are the tools, the trust, and the chance to chart our own path. I was fortunate enough to have these things when I found out I was pregnant years ago. I wanted a family, but it was the wrong time. I made the decision that was best for me, to have an abortion and get compassionate care at a clinic in my own community. Now, years later, my husband and I are parents to 2 incredible children. My story is not unique.
Okay, so E goes on. This is quite a significant departure from both Barack Obama, who once claimed that nobody is pro-abortion, and 2008-era Hillary Clinton, who called abortion a tragedy. The push for abortion on demand without apology isn't completely new. There have always been sites like I'mNotSorry.net on the extreme fringe of abortion advocacy. And Planned Parenthood did dabble in selling I Had an Abortion t-shirts back in 2004, but backpedaled after overwhelming criticism, some of it internal. But the huge media campaign for unconditional acceptance of abortion appears to be unprecedented. The reasoning seems to be that the gay rights movement was able to win the same-sex marriage debate through a similar approach, showing the general public that gay people are just as normal as everyone else is. Initially, I thought that abortion proponents had overplayed their hand. Contrary to what out-of-touch feminists say, people are not uncomfortable with abortion because they see it as a form of sexual deviance, but because something is deliberately killed in every successful abortion. The quote-unquote abortion grays don't see the unborn as equal in status to a toddler, but they might see abortion as similar to dog euthanasia, which most people will tolerate but still want to reduce to the greatest extent possible. The introduction of 3D ultrasounds and the debate over barbaric late-term abortion procedures have also made it very difficult for pro-choice people to say with a straight face that abortion is no different from any other surgical procedure. That genie is already out of the bottle. Still, though, they persist with the strategy, and maybe I'm underestimating them. After all, abortion proponents don't seem to be on the defensive anymore. And despite the obvious differences, gay marriage doesn't kill anything. It did work when gay rights advocates did it. So I would be curious to hear your thoughts. Do you think the push to normalize abortion is a credible threat to the pro-life movement? Have you noticed a change in your conversations on university campuses in the past 2 years? And how should pro-life advocates balance compassion for women with spreading the truth when faced with hashtag Shut Your Abortion type campaigns? So let's just take those 3 questions kind of one at a time. Do you think the push to normalize abortion is a credible threat to the pro-life movement?
I think that's really complicated. I'd like to start with a disclaimer. So I thought it was really stupid for Planned Parenthood to try to get people to ignore the Center for Medical Progress's undercover videos by calling them edited. Everything is edited. But the videos accurately depicted those conversations.
Right.
But Planned Parenthood just said over and over that they're edited, and remarkably, that was fairly effective damage control. Like just at a like historical level, unfortunately, for a lot of people who, when they think about the Planned Parenthood videos, they just think, oh, well, they were edited and that's all nonsense anyway.
Okay, so like clarification question, because I think I thought that you were saying one thing and I think maybe you're saying another thing. So like, are you saying that you thought at the time that it was a bad strategy for Planned Parenthood to push the editing thing, and now you're kind of saying like it was a good strategy, or what are you trying to say?
I think it seemed to have worked. At the time, I thought this is stupid.
Right.
Like people can see through this, and
Right.
and CMP posted the full versions of a lot of the videos.
Yeah.
Like you can see that they're not doing tricky, deceptive editing stuff. So at the time, I thought, well, they're going
It's not
down
gonna
the wrong road.
And then
but it worked for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Now, some people saw through it. A surprising number didn't. People who wanted to think of Planned Parenthood as fine just accepted what they said and didn't think more about it. Like if that was a lot of people.
Yeah.
And so like the question of what makes Planned Parenthood's PR strategies effective or not is a tricky question. And I think a lot of it has to do with whether people see through what they're doing. And so for their people, the people that like are inclined to like them, I think whatever they want to do, they're just going to believe anyway. And so in that sense, it's going to be effective. But something like this is harder. I think this is a harder sell. So I think like whether or not this is a threat to the pro-life movement and like a good strategy for Planned Parenthood totally comes down to whether they can sell this because they need it to win in the long term. Like that's my view.
Why?
Because what they're looking for, they want stigma-free abortion. You wrote a blog post about like post-abortion shame that you should probably link to as well, because I think that was really important. We're talking about like there's a certain kind of shame that I think is appropriate for abortion, and stigma is not a bad thing for abortion because it's a bad thing. Yeah. Abortion is a bad thing.
It's a really complicated topic, though.
It's a very complicated topic.
Fairly long article because it's really complicated.
Yeah. We're not going to get everything here.
I just like the disclaimer is if you don't read the article, like we're not saying we should go and shame people. We're saying that shame, the concept of shame, and what kind of shame is helpful and what kind of shame is unhealthy is complicated, and we should try to think of it well.
Yes. So in that context, there's a reason that they're pushing for this no shame, no stigma, shout your abortion thing, which is that like the long-term safety of abortion as a part of like social practice is dependent on them getting rid of the stigma. Yeah. Because as long as the stigma is there, then the threat's going to be there.
It's interesting.
It was so shocking to me when I initially heard that video, the NARAL person at the Democratic National Convention. Yeah. It's such an ugly thing. It's an ugly thing to proclaim that proudly and to applaud for it. Yeah. Like who wrote this question?
E.
Oh yeah. So E, I think, hit the nail on the head. I think every person who clapped for that is not pro-choice. Yeah. As a point of fact, they are not pro-choice. They celebrated a baby being killed. And it could be that what they meant by that was they're glad that she had the option, but celebrating the fact that she had the option is different than celebrating that she did it. They are pro-abortion people. Yeah. And that's like tragic and awful. But I don't think there's enough of them. Yeah. I think most people see that and it's like, not okay. And I think part of the reason why that happened, as just a matter of historical analysis, is they thought that Hillary Clinton was going to be president, as we all did. And Hillary Clinton is that level of radical. She's super, super pro-abortion, like no exceptions. And so like having a pro-abortion president like Hillary Clinton gives you a better chance of being successful with that kind of move. I think to some extent they were gambling on Hillary. I don't know what the effect is now because Trump being elected is really confusing.
So is it possible that will like basically where if Hillary had won, the shout your abortion hashtag thing would have continued. Maybe they're going to end it because Trump won and because they're going to see like there's a different strategy they got to take instead.
Again, I'm in way over my head trying to analyze PR at this level.
Right.
But my gut is their best move would be to back down. That with Hillary Clinton from standing in the bully pulpit, they could maybe get away with a more aggressive, no exceptions pro-abortion push. Yeah. And now they can't.
I think you're right. That's intuitive to me. Yeah, I think you're right. It's going to be more damaging for them than it was a few years ago.
Because they just seem more radical. And because the election is I think to some extent, a repudiation of how aggressively pro-abortion and anti-religious freedom the Democratic Party has become. I think that's a lot of what happened there. A lot of people who didn't like Trump voted for him anyway, and possibly wouldn't have if they hadn't been so aggressive about it.
Yeah. So I had a fairly similar view to you on this question. Like, I doubt that the whole hashtag shut your abortion thing would be this big danger to the pro-life movement, because my view is that I think when people tweet that, they'll probably get some likes. Like, people do the thumbs up kind of thing on Twitter, or the Twitter equivalent of a Facebook like, from people that are kind of on their side or trying to be supportive. But like, I don't think the impact they want to have is something greater than that, which is making the people in the middle have this internal psychological effect of being more warm and friendly towards abortion. I don't think it does. I think it just comes across as weird. I think it's like hashtag shut your miscarriage. And that's assuming abortion's totally morally neutral, which most people don't think abortion's morally neutral. But like, even if they did, like, how weird would hashtag shut your miscarriage be? Like, that's weird. Maybe this would have played better like when moral relativism hit its peak with young people. This is kind of assuming my premise that more and more young people are not really buying into relativism. If like there are no moral rights and wrongs, then maybe like someone does shut your abortion and it's like, okay, like maybe then it might have had a bigger impact. I just don't buy, like, I talk to too many people who believe that objective morals exist because of utilitarianism or whatever. I just don't buy this having the effect on the non-fringe side of it that it seems like the fringe side of it either thinks it will have or at least wants it to have.
Yeah, if I could, so like a superpower that would be really helpful in like this line of work would be like the ability to do like get instant, accurate polling information on all kinds of questions.
Yeah.
So like instant, accurate polling on how many people in this country right now think that abortion should be legal. I don't know what that number is. It's definitely a different number than how many people think abortion is moral.
Yeah.
And to some extent, if what the pro-choice lobby is going for is just, let's keep it legal, then those people who say, well, it's immoral, but that should be legal, those are allies.
Yeah.
They're not allies if you're shouting your abortion.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of room for backlash there. But again, like, it's weird, and I don't know why they were so successful on the undercover videos thing. So I take my view with a lot of salt here.
Yeah. So the second question was, have you noticed a change in your conversations on university campuses in the past 2 years? Like my thought on that is like I've certainly noticed some more hostility, but trying to pin down more hostility on like one causal reason is I think it's too complicated. My personal intuition, which I don't take that seriously, my view is that there are two different things that have caused people to be more hostile to me on campus than the shut your abortion thing, which would be the whole safe spaces kind of concept that you shouldn't be offending people, or at least if people are going to be offended, they should all be able to, there should be tents around a pro-life outreach or like whatever, like that kind of thing.
That's a huge factor, and that's complicated and has other causes.
Yes. But that, I think that causes some more hostility because I think we've got more people that are just instantly offended that we're talking about something controversial in public, even if we're not putting graphic pictures on signs. And then I think the other thing of this, like, I feel like there's this more, and I don't know how much of this is 2016 stuff and how much of this is like, there are more people, at least not just on social media, this happens in person too, that we're like, there are certain views that you just are not allowed to have. You are not allowed as a white person to be critical at all of Black Lives Matter, no matter what Black Lives Matter does. Or you're instantly like, even if you are critical, you don't want to say that out loud because you're basically just going to get called a racist. And there's like all these, like, you're not allowed.
The question of like race relations and Black Lives Matter is not a very dialogue-friendly topic on Facebook right now.
And again, I would say, I think what we're seeing on Facebook, that's indicative of the way people are in person. When I watch videos of clashes that have happened at Black Lives Matter protests or protests similar, or like maybe, that where Black Lives Matter is part of it and there's other groups or whatever, the kind of vitriol that has been spewed at people at things like this. Like, I'm not surprised at all that we see it be really, really nasty on Facebook. And I'll tell you, I very much choose not to get into this a lot of times with people because, like, I'm tired of being accused of being a racist. Like, I'm not gonna continue doing this thing. Like, I'm not gonna like, oh, no, I'm not a racist. Like, I'm just like, I'm done talking about this thing. But I imagine those two things, the safe spaces thing and this, there are certain opinions you're just not allowed to have, and we should be totally fine with totally shaming people and accusing them of like the worst things you can accuse people of if they have this view that I think is really bad. I think that causes more hostility, that like people being hostile toward me at an outreach, than this fringe group of some people doing #ShutYourAbortion.
Yeah, I think I totally agree with that. I'd say a couple other things is there's a kind of moral superiority that is taught from leftist university professors to their leftist students that is like, this is getting worse. And I think that is part of the causal factor of tough stuff with race relations as well. Because I think there are legitimate points being made on both sides of that argument.
Yes.
And it's remarkable how badly people are listening on that subject.
Even people who are usually good listeners. Like, there's like, we talk about smart people or like good dialogue people having blind spots sometimes. Like, it is weird to me how many people in my sphere of influence that I really, really respect have this common blind spot topic, or this topic that like is like really, really hard for people to have good conversations about, unless they completely agree from the get-go. Yeah.
So this is a rough one right now. I think part of the reason for that is this moral superiority thing. And so I think the preaching of moral superiority from leftist university professors, especially, also to some extent the media, I think really empowers this kind of attitude where you can say more extreme things if you're on the left and just get away with it.
Yeah.
That's the world that we live in. And I'm not saying like, it's okay for Trump to respond to any criticism of saying, well, that's just the media or whatever. Right. That's not what I'm saying. But there is absolutely media bias. There's absolutely huge university bias against conservatives, like really dramatically so. And so because of that, that has had multiple effects. One of them is the rough stuff with Black Lives Matter, understanding and aggression, and also more extreme pro-choice stuff.
It's interesting the biographical experience I'm having right now. I am really uncomfortable that I've said anything about Black Lives Matter. I'm like, I really want to talk about how, like, a common ground. Like, I think that there's been some really bad police brutality, and there's like, I'm really against that. I'm like, I've got all these things that I want to say to try to like make you think that I'm not a racist right now, because I've said anything on this topic that pretty much almost with every single person I don't talk about at all, even if I think that I have like common ground with both sides, even though I think I have some nuanced views and some things I've thought a lot about. Like, I don't want to talk about it. I'm like, it feels like I've triggered myself. I don't know if I should even regret bringing it up, but like, this is my best direct answer to this person's question.
Certainly, I have been very unimpressed with what most people have said on social media on the right and the left
about this topic.
On Black Lives Matter.
I agree.
Strongly so. And there's been good things, and there's been a horrendous amount of bad listening. Yeah. One more thing about the original question about shout your abortion. I think another factor that is causing this, that does affect our dialogues, is I think bodily rights arguments are getting more prevalent. And I think part of that is because the pro-life movement has done a really good job of responding to personhood arguments and hasn't done a very good job of responding to bodily rights arguments at the layperson level. There's been a lot of really good academic responses to it. Yes. But the layperson, like the lay pro-life apologist, is a lot more likely to know some kind of way of responding to personhood arguments than responding to bodily rights arguments. Yeah. And so I think that has really fueled the rise of bodily rights arguments being the thing that pro-choice advocates, lay pro-choice advocates, really turn to. And that is relevant to this also, because if you're a bodily rights person, it's more natural for you to be a shout your abortion kind of person.
Interesting. Real quick, let's jump to the last question that he asked us. And I love the way this question is worded. Like, this indicates to me like this is one of our people, because we talk about this idea of balancing compassion for women and the people that you're talking to with spreading the truth. Like, those both are really important things, really hard to balance well. And the question starts, how should pro-life advocates balance compassion for women with spreading the truth when faced with #ShutYourAbortion type campaigns? There's a blog post I wrote a while back, it was like a year or two ago, called "What Should You Say to a Woman Who is Happy That She Had an Abortion?" And I think kind of some of what I said there is relevant, because there was a question that I received is like if a girl comes up and says that Roe versus Wade has improved her life, and talks about all the things that she has been able to do after her abortion, like go to college. What do you think is the best way to respond to that person? And so I said, there's a few things that I would probably do. Like that's a difficult case. It's a difficult circumstance. It's different than the person's like, hey, I'm open-minded. I want to talk about abortion. Like this is harder. And I said, I'd probably say something like, I'm glad that you didn't suffer any physical complications of your abortion and that you aren't suffering from the depression that some of my friends who are also post-abortive have experienced. But let me ask you a question that's a little bit more philosophical. Do you think there are any other factors that people should consider as they try to assess whether abortion is morally right or wrong? Do you think that if some women are not negatively affected by abortion, that proves that abortion is morally neutral? And what I'm trying to do there is I'm trying to lead her to discussing other things besides whether a particular woman is happy or sad about her abortion. I want to get us talking about the central question of the abortion debate. Is the unborn a valuable person or not? We could demonstrate that abortion is wrong even if every single post-abortive woman had positive feelings about her abortion. You could also have a discussion about the difference between right and wrong versus like wise and foolish. Arguably, some pro-life slogans make a stronger case that abortion is foolish. That it's not a wise decision because of how it affects some women in society. And I think women should consider whether abortion is a wise decision or not. But we also want them thinking about how some things can be wrong even if they don't affect us negatively. You could have the head of a corporation that irreparably harms the environment or kills whales around Antarctica and not feel any guilt about that. Sure. He might not suffer any loss in profit. Like it actually might be profitable for his business to do that. It doesn't prove that it's moral or neutral or something like that. It could be immoral, and maybe he just like doesn't have a properly working
moral
conscience.
Compass isn't working, or
his
something.
Moral compass isn't working.
Yeah.
But here's what I would not do with the person who says like my abortion was so helpful. I would not say, but everybody is affected by abortion, which I've heard people say. Or I wouldn't say, well, you may not feel guilt yet, but you will later. I think statements like that are not going to be very helpful.
Yeah, it's a conversation stopping kind of maneuver. I think that given my views about the nature of abortion and the nature of reality, I think basically that everyone is affected by abortion. Like that is a view that I have.
Right.
That's just, to pull the curtain back. But that's not something that I would say to a person who just said, well, I had an abortion, I'm fine.
Right.
I think the best dialogue practice thing to do in that spot is to take them at their word.
Right.
Not say, but deep down,
right.
down,
like it could be like they're actually affected, but they don't know it yet, or like they're so like there's this like internal, protected, like kind of self-protective thing going on where they're just not even allowing themselves to kind of process that. So like they think they're not affected, even if they actually are. Or
they could be having nightmares every night and they just don't want to tell you.
Yes, that happens too, sir.
Either way, it's not helpful to say, you're going to feel them, or you're feeling them and you're just not admitting it.
You're lying to me. I don't believe you.
Like that's not an effective way to try to help lead someone to being emotionally healthier. Right. I don't want to destigmatize abortion because I think it's good for people to recognize at a moral level when something is sinful. So I'm going a little bit religious here.
Yeah.
Translate that in your head to wrong if you're like an atheist, all right? But like from my view, it's really, really good that we have moral compasses because we are healthier if we're not sinning. I believe very, very strongly that God does not just like arbitrarily say such and such is sin and such is not sin. Like it's not an arbitrary thing. Yeah. God didn't make sex really fun and then say, let's make this interesting and let's put like lots of restrictions on this and that'll really make people go nuts.
Right.
No, like the reason for that is that sex is designed for a particular thing. It's designed for the context of marriage, and in the context of marriage, it's a good thing. And when it's not, it's actually like by the design of what it is, it's a bad thing. It's not arbitrariness. And so because of that, when we are in sin, that affects us negatively. We're in a bad place. There's nothing that is good for us that God says, don't do that because it's sinful. Ha ha ha. There's none of that. Right. And so I don't want people to have abortions, partially because I don't want them to kill their kids. And partially because I don't want them to do that. It's very, very bad for someone to kill their child. It's very good that God is forgiving. It's better to not sin in that way in the first place.
Right.
So with the question, how do we balance the pro-life message with the Shout Your Abortion campaign kind of thing, and like trying to be compassionate towards women, we have to have a careful, nuanced approach. My desire is for people who have had abortions to know that it's sin and to go through healing for that. But it's not effective or helpful to have that was sinful, you need to repent as your opening line. It's just not for most people. Yeah. There's a point in a conversation where you have the kind of rapport and trust where it's appropriate to say, like, really, like, that wasn't okay. And like, you need to do something about that. Like there is a place for that. It's not early in the conversation.
Yeah. There's something interesting. I checked the Google Analytics on our blog, and there's something weird about this blog post that I talked about, where like this was one of those, like, I wasn't expecting this to be a big deal. Like, I just kind of wrote it really quickly. It's not very long. It's just like I got this email and I emailed them back and was like, oh, I'll just throw that on a blog. Like, it was like there are sometimes that we totally write blog posts that are like, oh, I hope this is a big deal. This was not. This was just one of those like throwaway kind of listener mail things. It's still the 8th most popular article, or most visited, I guess I should say specifically, article on a blog of about 150 articles, which indicates to me that like maybe this is a more shareable or like social media share friendly post. Like I really like, I talk to people a lot about like, you know, if when you're being effectively pro-life on social media, I think part of that is like just every once in a while sharing the kind of interesting article or video or whatever that won't be this really inflammatory, make your pro-choice Facebook friends mad at you thing. Like I've read articles,
you or something.
Right, or think that it's indicative of what you think. Like I've read like articles that make like really interesting points, and I get like halfway down, and then they start throwing around the term pro-abort, and I'm like, I can't share that. Like that's not gonna be helpful.
Even if there are good points in it.
I think our blog has a lot of good articles that are like you could post this and it's going to be fine because we're really trying to write in this kind of voice that's, you know, open-minded and thoughtful. So if you want to, if that's the kind of post that is interesting to you, you can find it at equalrightsinstitute.com/happy. I couldn't think of a better short URL to make for it.
We surely could do better than that.
It's answering the question, what if she's happy about her abortion? I know, like, what's pick the better one. I'll make it. I'll think about it. We're going to come up with something. The link will be in the show notes. Like,
if you have a suggestion for a better short URL.
I'm going to have 5 different short URLs in the end that would like all go to the same link. Whatever. I don't know.
It's fine.
This was fun. Like I like finding like now this feels a lot more interactive.
We've had smart listeners who ask good questions.
These are really good questions. We've had these multiple times where I've had on podcast notes like we've got show notes. We're going to record an episode. It's like, all right, we're going to do this topic, and then we're going to answer this question. Like I've had that question about arguments and question marks. Like I've had that on my list since like almost the beginning. Like and then we just and the topic goes for so long, and so it's nice to kind of be interacting. I'm interested in seeing a lot more questions from people on the forum that we can answer here. I'm also interested in getting to that idea of kind of bringing people on like by phone and actually interacting directly with listeners. Like you be, you know, a guest on the podcast and kind of ask your question, and then we can find out if we answered it well. Or you can ask you could ask follow-up questions or get your view out there. I'm interested in doing more of that in the future too.
It's like theater that breaks the fourth wall. It's like even farther away from television.
Do you ever watch those videos of bands that bring someone from the crowd up on stage to play with them?
I think I've seen videos like that. That's amazing.
I love that stuff.
That's what we're going to do on our podcast.
Love those videos.
Come on stage.